Right, thank you, members. I would like to welcome all members. No, this is no good. It's all coming back through me loud now.
It sounds all right, Mr. Mayor. Sounds all right this end.
I always sound all right.
And you are broadcasting, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, well, that Matt, I'll just put up with the echo then.
No. You've got it coming out of your tablet.
Well, I haven't got a tablet here, so that can't be right. Hello? Still doing it.
What's it coming out of? We've got audio coming out somewhere around here.
Well, I don't know where it's coming out. Anyway, we've got to get on with this meeting now. We can't just keep leaving it. As long as people can hear me, that's fine. Right. I would like to welcome all members, officers of the council, and any members of the public and press who may be viewing this meeting on YouTube. Welcome. Do we have any apologies for absence?
Yes, Chairman, we have apologies from councillors Ben Moose, Brown, Jones, Oguntopi and Mrs. Ozog. And we've got an apology for lateness from Councillor Sandhu.
With the echo, that's 18 members. That's fine. Are there any further apologies? No. Are there any declarations of interest? No declaration of interest. I call upon the leader of the council to move that the minutes of the meeting of the General Assembly of the Council held on the 14th of December 2020 be confirmed as an accurate record.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening. Yes, I'm very happy to move that the minutes of the meeting held on the 14th of December should be confirmed as an accurate record.
Is that seconded?
Yes, seconded.
Right. Members, is that agreed?
Agreed, Mr. Mayor.
Agreed.
Thank you very much for that, members. There are no further urgent items for consideration. I move that the council go into committee and that the rules of procedure of committees do apply. Is that seconded?
I'm happy to second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Kite. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Kite in the chair.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, members. Just before I start the item, you'll see it's a very, very weighty item of business tonight, and I apologise for the amazing amount of paperwork you've received. I think this is probably one of the largest agendas I've ever seen from this council, but that I think is a reflection of the fact that we've got some very, very important stuff tonight. Before I begin, I should say that in the intervening period between the last GAC and this one, we have lost some members and colleagues, not current servant members, but we've lost some former members and colleagues. We've also had some news about friends and colleagues within the council who have been unwell. Because this is an extraordinary meeting, I think it's appropriate that we should defer our tributes to those who have been lost. There's a couple of people that I think we need to make deserve proper tributes from the council, and we'll defer them to our next full meeting because this is an extraordinary meeting without the necessary opportunity to do so in any length. So just a quick word to those who've been unwell. I'm delighted to see that you're on the recovery, and to those who are grieving, obviously the heartfelt views of this council go out to you, and we are supporting you and standing with you during this difficult time. Mr. Mayor, we have this evening a number of big items in front of us, and I want to move on to the first of them straight away, which is the recruitment of directors. Early last year, or mid last year, we lost Graham Harris, our managing director. We still mourn him and miss his influence terribly. He was a friend and colleague to many of us and a very, very good influence on Dartford. And his loss has caused a huge gap. And then we have Mrs. Green, who has been serving as a director of this council for many years, and she's done so with extraordinary dedication and success. She has moved towards a well-deserved retirement, and I know she's not looking forward to it too much. I think she's decided to make this change at this point. It's obviously the right move for her in terms of her career and life now. It's what she wants to do, but I know I hope she'll miss us terribly, as we will, and once again it creates a huge void that we need to fill. So, Mr. Mayor, what we did, we called into play the statutory appointments panel, which meets very rarely, but to effectively look at these matters. We had a very good range of candidates to apply for 2 posts. We took the opportunity, as I think members are aware, to restructure the council very slightly, to have a slightly flatter structure now, which I think is appropriate for the modern era and taking us forward. And the posts we were looking to appoint were the Director of Housing and Public Protection and the Director of Community. Sorry, what was the other part of it? Something in community. I'm sorry, I've lost the other part of it. Director of
Growth.
Growth and Community. I'm so sorry. Growth and Community. So we entrusted to our colleagues at Hayes a recruitment process which went extraordinarily well. We had a very good, high quality number of applicants, and we sat one Friday morning and with a group of colleagues who I thank very much for their work. It was a long day. We interviewed a number of candidates, and you'll see in front of you, Mr. Mayor, we have now reached a conclusion. And that matter needs to be now verified by the council. And I'm very happy to report that the proposition is that the Director of Housing and Public Protection should be one Peter Dosad, who I think is very well known to most members of the council. And the Director of Growth and Community is Caroline Hicks. And it's the job of our council this evening to verify that and to approve their appointments. So, Mr. Mayor, I don't know whether there's other members of the council who wish to speak on this matter. I'm very happy to take any comments on it. Does anybody wish to say anything? Yes, Councillor Gosine. Thank you. Sasha Gosine. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kite. I just wanted to wish Sherry Green our best as well, and just say that we're working with her. It's been great and helpful when we needed help, and even though you're going, Sherry, just to let you know, you're not irreplaceable. You got a place for us. Take care.
How gallant. Yeah, okay. No, well, I guess he speaks the truth. We have to carry on. The council does move ahead, and we have a huge population to serve. I think there'll be aspects of Mrs. Green that clearly irreplaceable to us in terms of the way she's approached her work and the way she relates to members. But you're right, I guess, in a way. We have to move on, and I think we've found some extraordinarily good candidates, and I know Peter will be amazing in that role. He's got a lot of experience, a lot of love for Dartford, and a lot of experience of dealing with members here. So there we are. Mr. Mayor, you wanted to say something?
Yes, I think it is a real shame that Sherry is going. I think she's very, very difficult to replace. But I think we've got 2 fine candidates that have done this, but I think she is virtually irreplaceable. I disagree with the Leader of the Opposition.
Okay. Excuse me. Okay, well, there we are. I think the proposition before you now is really to advise you and to recommend the appointment of those successful candidates. If no one else wishes to speak, can I ask that we do that? Is anyone in opposition of that? Okay, speak now, forever hold your peace. No, okay. All right, well, in that case, I'm very pleased to say that the decision to appoint Peter Dosad and Caroline Hicks has been unanimously approved by the council. And I look forward, as I'm sure we all do, to working with 2 very, very fine candidates to steer us through what's going to be a crucial period for this council, and I hope the flatter structure provides, working with Sarah Martin, provides a great opportunity for us to show modern leadership to this borough and to continue serving in the way that I think the residents of this borough expect us to. So congratulations to both those candidates. Look forward to working with you, and we move on. Item 6 then is the Dartford Borough Council compulsory purchase order relating to 4656 Lowfield Street. Members might remember this was due to be on an earlier GAC. It's an important matter for us. We do need to cement our the progress of this development. It's very. I know there's been a lot of talk over the years about CPOs in the council. We actually use this power very sparingly for very good reason. It's a very unusual thing for a council to be doing. We don't make much use of it. But I think, as we're going to hear in a moment, it's essential really for us to conclude this issue and to move ahead with a comprehensive regeneration plan for Lowfield Street. I don't know who's due to speak on this. Mrs. Kelly Stone, are you planning to speak on this?
Thank you, Chairman. I think the planning officer is present, and it'd probably be best if I defer to her on the planning issues.
Of course. Okay. Well, sorry. Yes, go ahead, please.
Chairman, before you go to the planning officer, just to say that this report has been before members in some detail back in October. And what we're now doing is, subject to notice being served on the council by Bellway, is to provide a delegated authority to officers to make the CPO when that notice is served on us. So that's from a legal point of view. But I will defer to the planning officer to speak to it if members have questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Well, our professional planning officer, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, as members will see from the report, and as members will know, we've granted planning permission for the land that sits around the site that we're looking to CPO, which is 46 to 58 Lowfield Street. And we've granted planning permission, and Bellway are implementing that at the moment. It's been slowed slightly due to COVID, but the first occupations are due in summer this year, and there'll be more at the end of the year and following on into next year. This site sits in the middle of that. It's in fairly poor condition. We haven't had any discussions about redevelopment of the site with the owners, and actually it's become more obvious, the site, as the development around it has come forward, because the buildings around it have been demolished. And it's probably difficult to tell at the moment, but having been into the site, there were two elevations facing towards the park and facing north towards the town centre that will soon be open to the public and are in very poor condition and a very poor appearance. So the counts, we feel as officers, the way to bring forward this regeneration properly is to go forward through the CPO process. It's not something that I think we would have liked to go forward. We'd like to walk forward the redevelopment through discussions with the landowners, but we're left in the position that if we don't take this opportunity now, then the site may stay as it is for a number of years, really. And that does influence other landowners and other investment in the town centre. They look at the sites opposite and make a decision on that basis often. So yes, recommend the recommendation to members to agree the CPO.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Now, I know, I mean, members may have some interest in this. As I say, it's a rare thing for us to do and an important one. Is there any member wishes to make any comments about any of this? I flashed up oh yeah, sorry, Councillor McLean, take you first. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I agree. I support, actually, in principle, the order. And like the leader has said, we don't do this often. I think the one thing, and I think my colleague Councillor Davis is probably going to say something similar, so I'm going to get him first. It's the principle of a church premises. I think we need to be mindful of that as members, as who represent in the community, and also about the equalities impact on a specific demographic. I think that's significant. And I'm just referring to page 60, which kind of sets out the equalities impact assessment. Has any what attempts, so the question is, Sonia, what attempts did we make to find out what the demographic was? I know we've made some assumptions around the demographic you use in the church, but what attempts have we made to actually get that data? Is it the case that the current occupiers have been uncooperative and therefore you haven't been able to properly assess that? And if that is the case, that's the case. I think it's just really important we get that out in a public meeting that all members are aware. Clearly, for me, being lead member for equalities and the work we're doing around the One Dartford, I'd be very interested to just make sure that we've covered that. And is it the case also, because this specific church has another premises in close proximity, that we say that is mitigation? So you can't always, when doing these things, we know you can't always completely mitigate, but there is some mitigation in that there are other facilities, i.e. people are not having to go out of Dartford in order to worship. And if it is a specific demographic, i.e. the Nigerian community, that there are other facilities, and particularly this church, in particular, this organisation has another facility nearby.
Thank you.
Just to come back on that, just for clarity, the church, of course, doesn't have planning permission to use the site at the moment. and Development Control Board refused planning permission last year now, and that is the church have appealed to the planning inspectorate, and that's still going through the process at the moment. We haven't, in looking at the access report, we haven't got a breakdown of those details, no, from the church operators. There have been some assumptions in that assessment. But Bellway have also been discussing with the church alternative sites, and we've been working to look at alternative sites as well. And we continue to do that work as part of this CPO, bringing forward the site for redevelopment.
Thank you. I guess what that means in practicality is that the operation of the church there is not currently a material issue, although we obviously have an obligation to do our very best to ensure an orderly series of processes in relation to a potential CPO. If the church doesn't currently have planning permission, I guess it's not material at the moment. Although the fact that it's going to appeal, I suspect, means that we would need to consider that as material. Is that right at the moment?
We certainly need to consider, they are an occupier, we certainly need to consider the impact on them, whether it's got planning permission or not. So yes, we do need to consider that.
How much of that changes though, where if they win the appeal? That's kind of, you know, sometimes we run that risk, even though we know we've made a sound decision on something, haven't, you know, sat on the board for 6 years now. So what happens if they do win the appeal, Sonia? Where does that leave us with this? Does it just make it more complicated?
If they appeal against the CPO, then that will be one of the considerations by the inspector at the inquiry into the CPO.
But I think what Councillor McLean was talking about was whether the appeal for the operation of the church went ahead. I think in order to protect everyone's interest and to do the right thing, we ought to make an assumption, a working assumption, that this is a operating church. I don't think it's right for us to exploit the lack of planning application in terms. I mean, I know that it's provided for information, it's relevant, but I think what we need to do is to do our very best endeavours to make sure we cover every base in making sure that this operation is protected and treated fairly through the process, and I'm sure that's what we intend to do. Is that a fair summation of it, Ms. Collins?
Yes, absolutely. As I say, we have to consider the impact of you know, removing the premises for that church and where else they can go in the town centre. Yeah.
Fine. Okay. Thank you. All right. Is there anyone else on this wants to say anything? Please do speak up. I only see half of you at a time. So if I'm, oh yes, Councillor Davis, I've got you now. Thank you.
Good evening, Leader. Thank you. Through you, can I ask what financial or legal comeback do we have with the proposed new owner if they do not proceed with their development within a reasonable amount of time? Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know whether is that one for you, Sonia, again?
I think that might be something that Marie could answer better.
Okay, Marie, then, please. Sorry, before you begin, Marie. Oh, sorry. Before you begin, Marie, I ought to explain for those watching on YouTube. Sonia Collins is our most senior planning officer, and I'm turning this over now to Marie Kelly Stone, who is the council's legal officer, just to clarify for members watching or people watching at home. Sorry, Marie, I interrupted you.
Thank you. That's okay. We're covered by a cost indemnity, so that sets out specifically what are the compensation that might be payable and so on. So there would be no liability to the council as such in terms of finance, because that's all covered by the compensation with CPO cost indemnity. I wasn't too sure when you said, you went on to say if the development wasn't completed within a certain time. Am I right in thinking that?
Yeah, so I'm trying to preempt this site remaining undeveloped under its new owner compared to its current owner. We may not be able to do anything about that, but I just wondered if that was possible, that we could oblige them to proceed with development. Thank you.
That's a different point to the CPO issues, and I would have to defer to Sonia about the planning conditions and the timescale for completion.
Sure, but if I'm sorry, I don't want to bounce stuff onto you, Marie, but I think the point that we're making as members is that if we are proceeding with a serious step of taking on a CPO on behalf of a developer, and the developer then doesn't perform, is there any comeback for us in terms of that, or is there any insistence we can build in within the CPO? I mean, that would seem to be manifestly unjust if we had CPO'd and deprived through law the ownership of another party of their premises, and then nothing happens to it. I understand that legally that may be fine, but of course the whole point of the CPO is for us to bring about regeneration. So I think that's the point we're trying to make: is there any anything we can put into our CPO which requires the new beneficial owner to effectively move within a reasonable time? Is that a legal or is it a planning issue?
It's a planning issue, Chairman, because it's different. Whatever the planning application comes out as, then that's a matter for the planners to decide on the timescale. And I think timescales are prescriptive, as I understand it. Sonia will be able to respond to that more.
Sure. I think both Matthew and I realise this may be a moot point, because I think the operators are moving ahead very quickly. But Sonia, can you just clarify that for us then? I mean, what is the planning status of unperformance or non-performance on the site?
Normally, that would be very difficult. Once a developer's implemented a plan permission, they could choose to start and then stop. I mean, certainly that's, given that this is an important site, that is something that we could cover off within the Section 106. But of course, that would be dependent then on the CPO being successful and Bellway owning the site. So it would be dependent on them taking on the site. But that certainly is something we could look at through the 106 to ensure the delivery of the site. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. Well, look, I think we all probably understand it is a bit of a moot point, because, as I say, I think Bellway are moving ahead with great speed on the site. But it's a point well made, Matthew. I think we would not, in all conscience, want to affect a CPO only to find that then nothing happens on the site. It rather takes away the whole point of moving to complete a comprehensive development if that happens. But I think there's obviously a legal issue in there. But so, Sonia, if I may ask you, could you just strengthen that for us and do what you suggest, and actually look at the 106 to make sure that there are proper conditions in there which protect the interests of our town, not so much the council or anyone else, but just the interests of our town in making sure the site is not underused. Is that okay?
Yes, sorry. Yes, we'll do that. I've made a note of that, definitely.
That's fine. Okay. Is there anyone else on this wants to contribute?
Could I say a few things, please?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. First of all, many apologies. I was running late. I was actually out walking and just got back in. So there's no declarations of interest. I do apologise for being late.
That's okay.
And I think all the points that Councillor McLean and Councillor Davies has raised are very, very beneficial indeed. And, we're talking about the CPO and possible allocation wherever we can, working with them, with RCCG, etc., to relocate them. But in case if we can't find anything as an authority and help them support that manner, will they financially still be in a position? I know they will have sold the site, but moving ahead, let's just say, I'm just going to use as an example, the Mercedes-Benz site is up on the market. If they suddenly said that they would like to purchase that, let's just say again, hypothetically, that the compulsory purchase is $500,000 and that site is over $1 million, would they be able to still buy something comparable that is adequate for their needs?
Well, I think we're probably going to hear at the moment the CPO sets a valuation rate, which is effectively a market valuation rate. That should, in theory, be comparable with other market valuation rates. That's the whole point of setting them. Although I do accept, of course, that in land purchases, speculation and rates aren't always set at the market at a valuation rate. They are effectively set at a market rate. So if there's two competing interests for a site, the site may well soar above valuation rate. I absolutely get that, but I think as far as I'm concerned, Mrs. Kelly-Stone, the whole point of this CPO is to effectively bring into play the valuation, which effectively provides a fair valuation for the site that's being under consideration. Is that right?
It is, Chairman. Yeah.
Yeah, so I can't. I don't think it's for this council to then project forward as to whether the valuation rate enables an occupier to effectively purchase land at a market rate. That is a matter for them in the market. And I also think it's fair to make the point that there is still an opportunity, even now, there's still an opportunity for a private treaty deal to proceed, and effectively there could be a resolution that doesn't require the CPO. I think that's fair enough. And I think what we're doing tonight is reserving those powers and making it clear that we will be prepared to use them. But I must be honest with you, particularly when you have an occupier whose interests are clearly well intended in the community. I guess what we almost hope is that actually there's a private treaty out there somewhere, which makes it less complicated for everybody, and that the value of doing that is seen by both parties, and they move ahead with private treaty. Nothing we're doing tonight will prevent that, will it, Mr. McKelly-Stone? I mean, it certainly puts a backstop to the timing. I get that, but there's nothing to stop that private treaty work continuing, is there?
There isn't, Chairman, and we're obliged to continue those negotiations.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. Is there anyone else then on this? You better speak up, please. I know you normally put your hand up and things, but do be rude. Do speak up if I miss you, because I can't see everybody. Okay. All right. Well, I think that's it then. So what I've now got is some recommendations for you. I've got 2, 1, 2, 2, and 2, 3. First of all, the recommendation 1 is to accept that the reasons are reasonable that we've given. 2 is to accept that the terms of the indemnity should be accepted, and further 2, 3 that the report should be presented to the council to approve the making of the order and confirm the extent of the land to be acquired going forward. So you have those recommendations in front of you. Oh, and I'm sorry, that was the old. I'm sorry, I'm reading the old one, aren't I? That was the agenda we had back in July. The actual requirement for us tonight is to move ahead with that now. So forgive me for confusing you. There is the recommendations for tonight then, which effectively make that order. So are members happy with that?
Agreed, Chairman.
Thank you. I do apologise for the confusion. What I was reading to you was the recommendations back from July when we were leading towards this meeting. So just to be absolutely clear, crystal clear, what we're doing tonight is now approving the making of that order. So members happy?
Agreed.
Yeah. Nobody in dissent? That's great. Thank you very much indeed. Okay. On then to our next big item, and boy, is it a big item. This is the work of the publication of the draft Dartford local plan. We've got a number of planning officers here who have worked incredibly hard to get to this point. I know they would want me to make the point that effectively we must, as a council, approve a local plan. We are hugely exposed if we either don't have a local plan or the local plan is deficient to current regulation. We are seeing a degree of discomfort just across our boundaries in Gravesham, where there is a consideration that the planning arrangements there for housing may not be sufficient. We've seen the government intervene a little, and we're supportive of Gravesham in trying to work a way through this, because it has implications for us too. We want to see the orderly growth and control of growth. That's always been our point. Managing growth in Dartford has become an extraordinarily complicated issue. We are geographically in a place which is, I think the estate agent's terms is hot. There is a place. This is one of those places where people want to move. It's a place where businesses want to locate. It's a place where people feel the benefit of moving to from other places. So all of those things combine, and we must never forget that the heart of this is also the existing population, who undoubtedly will have some nervousness about growth and where it goes. And we set out our stall, I think, as clearly as we can, that what we're trying to do is to focus upon urban areas and areas of a growth corridor, and to ensure that we protect the varied aspects of our communities. It's a huge piece of work. Now, I haven't counted these pages, but there's many hundreds of them here. Just in terms of our role tonight, I think, again, members would probably want me to remind you there has been a very extensive piece of cross-party work leading into tonight. It doesn't mean that any conversations tonight are going to be curtailed. You can go anywhere you want, explore anything you want, but please do bear in mind there's been a huge amount of technical work going on behind all of these, and the cross-party work has been going on literally for 4 years, and that work has been seen through by Derek Honeysett as chairman of of my working group on it, and the cross-party membership has been working incredibly hard, many hours expended on it. As I say, I'm not for any moment at all attempting to suggesting we should curtail any of the discussion tonight because of that. We can go and explore anything you like, but at the end of the evening we do have to come to a conclusion based upon the papers in front of us, and those papers have been worked through very extensively by a cross-party group of members. So I think Councillor Honeysett, my thanks to you, my thanks to all the members of the local working group, and I think with that I'll bear in mind, if we spend a minute or two on each of the pages of this, we'll be here till next Thursday. So we do need to make some progress, but I don't want anyone to feel they don't have an opportunity to explore these issues. But please do bear in mind that they have been explored by the cross-party working group, representing all of us to some extent over a long period of time. So with that, I think probably the best thing to do now is to hand over. Mr. Applin, I think, was going to say, Sonia, are you happy for Mark to steer this through? Yes, give me a nod, or do you want to make an introductory comment?
No, that's fine. Mark is the one who's spent the most time on it. Best to
Okay, Mark, that's fine. And Mr. Mayor appears to be being robbed by a highwayman at the moment. Can you switch your camera off, Roger, so that you've obviously got some technical issues there, and we're trying to resolve them for you. But okay, Mr. Applin.
Good evening, members. Thank you. So members should be aware of the importance of achieving a sound new local plan, because this would retain maximum local control over our planning decisions. This is a key stage in taking the plan forward. So members are asked to agree the recommendations accordingly, notably the local plan document itself, Appendix A, for publication. This should be corrected as per the update circulated on Friday and placed online. Members are also asked to approve the other supporting report appendices. I know there's several of them, but this does include the important sustainability appraisal in particular, and the map documents circulated in the update as well. So thank you.
Okay, all right. Well, I think the way to steer this through is probably to have a general debate, first of all, and to stimulate that debate. I guess there are members who will want to comment on this. It's a hugely important document. Forgive me, I haven't done this in advance. I haven't, I'm sorry to spring this on you, but Councillor Honeysett, would you like to just give a quick introduction to the work of the working group over the last 4 years, just to explain how that has been meeting and how you've tackled the work of getting to this point?
Thank you, Leader. Yes, the working group meets with the officers quite regularly. We certainly at least once a quarter, depending on the workload, and we go through quite detailed discussions with them. We are aware of course, what members' aspirations are for the development within the authority, and of course, we're very aware of what our residents would like us to do. We also have to be mindful, of course, of government guidance, and we discuss those various elements with officers in some detail. We've had a very good local development plan in force for a number of years, and I think members will know that by the amount of success we have when appeals are lodged against us. But there were one or two weaknesses in it, which were identified, and we have discussed those with officers in order to strengthen those areas of weaknesses. And we are very mindful of the amount of development we need to have and where we need to place them. So in essence, the working group unanimously support the recommendations before you, and we believe they form a very sound plan which should be approved by the Inspectorate. Thank you, Chair.
Cool, thank you. Okay, well, let's launch into this then. Let's see who wants to kick the conversation off and in what sort of areas. Yeah, I'm going to do this unscientifically, if you don't mind, unless the opposition leaders want to come in which case I'll treat them slightly differently. Otherwise, I'll just do it as I see people. And what I've got at the moment is Councillor Oakley-Dow, and then I had Councillor Davis and Councillor McLean. So, Councillor Adrian.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Derek, for that introduction, and it's within the context that I declare, perhaps this may be a naive question, but hopefully not. It's within the context of an awareness of the very good work, which I commend of all the members, the cross-party work as well over the years, the fact that it's an adaptation of an existing local plan, which has worked very well, as Derek has just said, has served us very well. And in my experience as a member of the Development Control Board, as well as a resident of Dartford for the last 20 years, with an active interest in matters planning related. It is based on contemporary experience, and it is based on that experience of being a member of the Development Control Board that I flag it up, that it is my intention to approve of this plan. I think it's a very, very good piece of work, and I think it's going to stand us in very good stead, as everyone said already. So please don't think it's criticism for the sake of it. But
there's a but coming, isn't there?
Oh yeah, page 1, 2, 3. With respect to everything I've just said, page 1, 2, 3, 5.56, the thresholds and headline target for affordable housing. Please bear with me; it is within a context.
Yep.
And I'm delighted. I say delighted to see an aspiration and an ambition of at least, as a minimum, 35% of affordable housing within, you know, the split within that of 20 and 15% between affordable and social. Sorry, the other way around, which I think is highly commendable. However, I just want to flag up that my approval of this local plan, and I think for a lot of members, I don't want to speak for members, but from my experience of development control meetings and assessments of applications by developers of quite major housing projects within the borough, which is a delight to see that there is a concern about our ability to deliver a percentage of affordable housing. And just recently, I have to say, it's to my great chagrin that up till very recently, we've been struggling very hard to achieve anything up to 10 or 12% within developments of affordable and social housing. And this has been flagged up by members of all persuasions. This isn't just a party political point I'm making. It's a consideration of a lot of members, which I respect hugely, and it's been mentioned. And you know, Councillor McLean himself was quite surprised that members of the Labour persuasion weren't making a bigger fuss about this at a recent application, but it had previously been discussed in some detail. At the minute, we struggle to achieve between 10 and 12% affordable housing. But recently, I actually became aware of our own strategic risk register, target risk, within a meeting of the audit board. And within 53 strategic risks assessed, there were 3 which were, I mean, I'll digress slightly. There's a traffic light scheme of green, amber and red, and where red, there is no assurance of the target being reached. So in fact, there's a target risk rating of no assurance. It's unlikely, and I quote the council's document, as a result, it is unlikely that council or service objectives will be achieved. Now, within the council's own strategic risk register, there are 3 out of 53 which are identified as giving no assurance of completion. One is HS1, that affordable housing is not delivered. I mean, it speaks for itself. I mean, coincidentally, and I'm not going to resist the temptation to say it, is that HS4 it can hardly be unconnected, an increase in homelessness. And actually reference ER1 in terms of strategic aim would be the regeneration of Dartford may not be achieved. That is the council's own strategic risk register, which says that. So whilst I approve this local plan, and whilst I think it's a commendable piece of work by everyone involved, I'm deeply concerned at our ability to deliver it. And I hope it's not lip service to a lofty ambition and a laudable ambition, but if we've already admitted to ourselves within strategic risk that it's unachievable, then how do we face ourselves in the future when we actually see 35% being an impossible dream?
Okay, well, thank you for that. And honestly, I do appreciate it as a thoughtful contribution to the debate, and I appreciate that it's not coming from a political place. And one of the reasons I kind of know that is because as a council, I think we have kind of bucked the trend in terms of dealing with social housing and becoming indeed as a social landlord and taking our responsibilities. And I think there's not a person in this Zoom room who doesn't appreciate that this council is probably ahead of the game in so much in terms of homelessness, in terms of housing services, in terms of its social responsibility to people. If I could answer, I'm sure the officers will come in technically with the answer for you, but I think one of the answers may be, Adrian, that actually this is a target where there is no overshooting possible to bring you up to an average. So the only way is down. Once you set a target of 35%, the only way is every failure on an individual scheme. And let's remember, this is policy which enables developers to claim viability and claim to that it's not possible to deliver. Every scheme reduces the number that you can get to, but there's nothing in the system which allows for any overshoot. There is no determination or ambition for any developer, of course, to overshoot the number. So I think that's probably where it is. It's almost like a statistical issue that once you set a number for affordable homes and then you put in place some viability assessments that means that some might not be delivered, the only way is down in terms of your target. You are clearly not going to reach it because there's never any overshooting to balance it out. I think what we must do as a group of people together is recognise our united responsibility to housing. It's not just about, I mean, and I hope members around the room will understand, we're not one of those conservative councils which is just interested in our leafy green communities. We do a huge amount of work with people who are trying to get on the housing ladder. Indeed, we have a committee which is pretty much dedicated to nothing else that Councillor Moat is overseeing, dedicated to rebalancing and helping. But there are simply issues of viability out there which are legal and which are part of the planning process. And so I think that's where we stand. All I can say is that every time, there is absolutely no intention of this council to avoid any obligations for affordable housing. Indeed, I can kind of look you in the eye, Councillor Oakley-Dale, by saying that you know very well that we are one of those councils that develops our own social housing, where there is actually no obligation on us to do that. We do it because it's the right thing to do, the moral thing to do. And at one point, I don't know if it's still true, but at one point last year, we had actually in Dartford developed more social housing in Dartford than the entire Welsh government had developed in Wales. And we continue to be at the very, very top of the league tables of those authorities in Kent who are delivering social housing. So I think that's it. I will come to the other issue. We won't, because this is a key issue, we'll have a debate about this before I move on to the other speakers. But then I think what we do after that is try and take in groups of speakers, if you don't mind. But Mr. Applin, have I kind of explained where we stand in terms of that aspiration and why those ambitions are listed in that way?
Yes, I think that's a relevant point on the target. More generally, just to confirm to members that should the plan be published after tonight, then as part of the examination process with the Planning Inspectorate, that will both look at national policy, which is quite extensive on this topic, and as you allude to, we have to adhere to. But it will also look at overall delivery aspects, and I expect quite a few of those kind of points around the delivery of policies will be raised and objections made by various parties, including developers, to the planning inspector. So I'm sure those points will be addressed. Yeah.
Fine. Okay. Well, we will move on, but I want to make just to reiterate, as the leader of the council, on behalf of the cabinet and the executive, I want to make absolutely clear that our commitment to social housing is complete. It's comprehensive and it's all-encompassing. You cannot have a civilized, successful community if you don't consider those who are trying to make that first step on the housing ladder, or for that matter, those who've fallen off that first step and are in housing crisis. You absolutely have to have a balanced community, and it's in the interest of this entire town that we address that. And so if there are issues with the market, then we have to face them together, but it certainly doesn't come from an ambition. I've got Councillor Davis next. I've got you, Councillor Reynolds. I've got you next. Thank you. Sorry. So just be clear. It's Councillor Davis, Councillor McLean, then Councillor Reynolds. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kite, for that.
Matthew?
I'm happy to give way if Calvin or Lucas wish to discuss affordable housing specifically. If not, I'll go ahead with my.
Okay, well, I'm getting an indication from Calvin McLean that he does. So
Okay.
please, yeah, Calvin.
Calvin.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you to the whole planning services team for this. You know, they work incredibly hard, and you know, having been on the Development Control Board for nearly 6 years now, you know, the policy is always really, really important for us in making our decisions. And Derek is right. The chairman of the DCB is right. We have some gaps, and it was important that we address those gaps. The planning officers won't be surprised to hear that I always go on about this issue around affordable housing, and it's going to be a very rare occasion that I am united completely with my colleague on the board, Adrian Oakley-Dow, on the issue of affordable housing. In the 6 years that I've been on the board, I can think of so many times before COVID, where clever developers and their lawyers are able to come up with a reason why they can't meet the 35% target. I don't think I've ever seen an application, apart from those that DBC are heavily involved in, i.e. the bridge, where we've ever achieved the target of affordable housing. So I suppose really the question mark is, or Sonia, is there anything we can do, and I'm sure you already have, to put more rigour? Is there anything else we can do, or are we completely constrained by the law to put more rigour on this point? Because we see so much development in Dartford, and what I worry about, and this is the slightly socialist side of me, is that we're leaving some communities behind in the aspirations of the borough, not intentionally, because I think we, as the leaders already said, we as a council do everything that we can around social housing, and particularly if you think about us as a landlord ourselves, the housing that we've built. Is there anything else legally that we can do to put more rigour into this issue of meeting social housing supply? If I just talk about the one that we were talking about, which Adrian was talking about earlier on, a development of 220 properties, and they could only achieve 10% affordable housing, and there was only 2.6 of those units that would have been for affordable rent. That seems to me to be quite derisory, considering the size of the development, and it just sends a really bad message. And all of those of us who are passionate about housing and affordable housing, as I am, it just seems to me to be really, really unacceptable. But overall, this is a brilliant policy document. I have read a lot of it. I didn't read all of it. And then we had all those supplementary documents that got sent to us on Friday. And I was like, oh, I thought I'd read it all by now. But no, overall, very, very supportive. A lot of work's gone into this, and we've got some very good officers at Dartford. It's just that one issue that I've always had a problem with. And I would really like to see if there was anything else we can do to put more rigour into that. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. I've got Councillor Hammock who's indicating. Is it about this issue, Dave? Otherwise, is it about homelessness, about affordability? Yeah.
Yes, it is indeed.
Go ahead, then, please.
If I may, Adrian's absolutely correct about the risk register, but I believe the risk register is referring to external developers and their percentage contributions. I will speak with the audit manager tomorrow and see if she incorporates Dartford's own developments, which are 100% social, and see if that makes any difference. And if it does, we'll have to revisit the risk register to have it altered to get the correct position in total for this authority.
Okay, that's cool. Thank you very much indeed. I've got some ideas about national policy on this, but I won't interrupt. We've got other speakers. So let me go back then to Matthew Davis, please.
Could I just come in?
Yes, Lucas, if you want to, yeah.
Because I think Matt's going to go on a slightly different tangent. I do agree with Councillor Oakley-Dow that in reality meeting the target is going to be very difficult, and the paper says it's going to be very difficult, and that's disappointing. But I don't think we should see that as a negative that we have at least got the goals in the plan itself. Developers, as Councillor McLean was saying, constantly, pretty much every meeting, have a viability assessment that they submit to us that tells us that they cannot do something because they can't afford to. And I would say in 99% of the cases, we have fought them on that and managed, in my experience, to get them to deliver something. I know it's not ideal, but I think that this is a document that is there to work in tandem with the Development Control Board. We shouldn't see it as a standalone document. It's there for us to utilise and make the most of where we can, and put pressure on developers in conjunction with the report to push this point. And as Councillor McLean and others have alluded to, this is something that people from all political persuasions challenge on a regular basis. And we have come up with some inventive ways in certain instances where it's been feasible to get revaluations on properties at a point in time, to establish whether additional affordable housing can be added to a development. So we've got mechanisms like that I think we've used in the past, and on the larger developments certainly can make more of in the future. But collectively, with the attitude of the board as it is, I think that should be seen as a positive. That we've always tried to push, in my experience, in the right direction. Not achieving it is disappointing, but what would be more disappointing is if we weren't trying to achieve it, which we are. And we've set ourselves a goal that is above expectations, and that's really what we should be doing. We should be aiming for more. So I'm happy with the report. I agree with the sentiment, and that it's not the ideal scenario, but in general, I think the direction is exactly where we should be going.
Okay, thank you. I'm conscious I'm really pressing Councillor Davies's generosity here, but I've got one more, David Moe, on this subject, and then we'll come back to you, Matthew. David.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, Matthew. Just a very quick one. I think we're all in agreement in the fact that we're all very concerned about viability, and this will move forward. But I think we also have to recognise that viability is not something that we as a council identify specifically. We do go out to independent and supposedly learned people when it comes to identifying viability. I think in the past, we've got to recognise that some of the bits of land that people are now building on aren't exactly the easiest bits of land to build on. And the last one we all refer to near Crossways is a case in hand. However, I would be particularly keen to make sure that our planning colleagues keep a very close eye on this in the future, because I do believe that people will jump on that particular bandwagon thinking that we might be a bit of a soft touch when it comes to viability. We are certainly not. And I hope that there will be a tremendous element of rigour when it comes to making sure that independent viability exercises are actually adhered to. The fact that we as a council are actually building more social houses than anyone else, I think it is on record, but it's certainly going forward. It is a very small part of this very, very large report, which again, I will be supporting, but I think it's quite right that we should be talking about it at this particular point. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, I've got Matthew Davies and I've got Councillor Gaskin. Matthew.
I've forgotten what my question was.
Excellent.
No, I haven't.
Oh, no.
It's about infrastructure. I think the current residents of Dartford would see the benefits of this plan more readily if the infrastructure that was within the control of the council, and I'm thinking primarily of the community infrastructure levy infrastructure, was expedited, and so therefore I'd like to ask you, leader, to do whatever you can to speed up the delivery of the infrastructure that is within the control of the council, and which we have the money sitting in the bank account. So I think, as I said, it will help demonstrate the benefit of this plan to the current residents of the borough. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and that's a very fair and once again, a profoundly interesting and thoughtful response and a question. I think one of the frustrations with Seal is that it's a bit like being given. Well, this is not, in fact, it's a very bad example actually, but I'll do it anyway. Now I've started. It's a bit like having money given to you at Christmas and feeling the thing you wanted to buy isn't available for a couple of weeks, and therefore you decide to spend the money anyway because you just want to spend the money. A lot of the stuff that's in Seal is hugely inextricably inextricably linked to big social infrastructure projects such as healthcare facilities, education facilities, and sport and leisure facilities. And we're not always in the driving seat with those, particularly on the health. I think the one thing that we all want to see before this pandemic, but certainly after it, is investment in health facilities and anything we can do in community health to take the pressures off hospital and to make people more healthy. But here's the perfect example of a situation where we are simply not in the driving seat. So do we hold that SIL money until we think that the health service are able to deliver something, or do we, as you say, expedite the spending to move ahead? Now, I think it's got to be a balance of those things, and I think we've got to take that work. The one thing I will say, just perhaps to reassure you, is that there is a SIL working group which looks at these things on a fairly regular basis. It doesn't meet that often. I think it meets probably 3 times a year, maybe twice a year, but it does have very, very comprehensive discussions about the SIL situation and the timetable. The timetable is the key to it, and we do have that. But I take your point. I think the residents of this borough, I don't think it's necessarily just growth that is the issue. I think for some of them, of course, growth is a big issue, but I also think it's effectively worrying about how we're going to cope going forwards. As it happens, I think the plans are in place to enable us to cope going forwards, but they don't always see it on the ground. But then when we do deliver, you still get the criticism, because the number of people who write to me saying, well, you're not providing the schools. Well, the fact is we are. I mean, there are brand new schools opening in Dartford that have opened, are very successful, and there are more to come. But again, it's about working with those partners to really bring that forward. But I do thank you for the thoughtful suggestion. It's very, very helpful. Councillor Gaskin.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I also would like to say thank you and congratulate officers on a really thorough and detailed and excellent piece of work with the plan. I've got a couple of questions. First one is in relation to the number, the envisaged number of total new builds, which has been reduced from the previous one. It's now standing at 790. And I just wonder, is it sufficient? I do hear Councillor Kite praising Dartford, and I praise Dartford as well for building so many social housing projects as compared to Wales. It's not the number that matters, it's the need that needs to be satisfied. So let's say if Dartford has greater need than Wales, therefore we need naturally to build more. So I would like actually, what I would like us to consider is the quite exponential growth of Dartford. Dartford has seen about 28% growth in population, it's the highest in Kent, and it will grow, especially now Dartford is on Oyster line. So we will really see quite extensive growth in the need for housing. So is it sufficient? What will happen if this will become, really not adequate? And again, in relation to the infrastructure, I think we need to have quite solid plans for infrastructure, not as afterthought, not looking back, but looking way in advance, because we do hear from our residents, where are the schools? Yes, we may have new schools. Is it enough? Does the provision satisfy the needs? So yes, I will approve this plan, but I do have concern whether we can keep up with the demand. So is there any leeway, any provision on increasing the bills as, in line with increased growth?
Thank you very much. Well, first of all, I take your point about needs-driven development, but I do think it's probably safe to assume that the needs of housing in Wales, the totality of Wales, are greater than the needs in Dartford. I wait to be disproved of that, but I think probably Wales probably would have a greater housing need than Dartford. In terms of where we go in terms of growth, yes, of course, you could exponentially increase this number of building and growth, and I understand that could be a policy of yours to say, well, let's build more and more. actually, I think we have to look at the fact that, as John Donne says, no man is an island, and there are alternatives in terms of growth within the region, within the wider sub-region, and within the country. And what we've got to see is a fair distribution of growth across those areas. So the truth of the matter is that if Dartford were to roll over and say, oh, well, you know, we could take more because there's more demand here, that would never stop. I'm sure the government, the developers, everybody would simply say, well, that's great, you know, well, marvellous. We'll all move to Dartford because you've got a council there that's willing to grow exponentially and not worry. Well, I know you didn't say not worry about things, but to try to keep on growing to meet up demand. I don't think you ever could, because what you do is you begin to suck in demand to an area where growth is growing. So I respectfully would say to you, a policy of considering whether we should be building more is not something I think people would support, and I don't think it's and as I say, this could be one of the fault lines that runs between the parties in this area, and I hope it doesn't grow too big, but it sounds like a fault line that actually, you know, some want to see more building. We don't. We want to see, and we celebrated and we worked very hard to get that mutant algorithm number down. We explained to government that you couldn't deliver a rounded full community if you took this algorithm of simply building more and more and more because demand was out there. You have to rebalance with other areas around you. So I think that's the policy we're taking. So respectfully, I don't think we're going to find agreement on that point. I don't think we would agree that you should build more houses or keep on building more houses. I think what we've got to try and do is to suppress the building to meet our local demand, but also then to ask where that demand is coming from and whether it could reasonably be rediverted and triaged into other parts of the region, the sub-region, or the sub-region, the region, or the country. So that's the view. As I say, it might be a fault line between our parties, and let's hope it doesn't become too big, because I think we've enjoyed a lot of cooperation on this, but it is a fault line, and I think it's worth recognising that. Is an officer on the technicalities of demand-driven development? I mean, if we were to, Mark, for example, to take Councillor Gaskin's proposition, which is a perfectly reasonable intellectual one, to say, look, if there's lots of demand out there, we keep on building until we meet it. Mark, is that what do you think the implications of that would be for us?
Well, I would urge members to consider the implications, not just in terms of the numbers, but in terms of where that might require development and impact on the whole of the borough, whereas in this plan we set out quite a clear strategy to focus on in and around Dartford town centre and Ebbsfleet in particular. It's not the case you can always achieve the numbers in those desired locations in the way you might wish. So I think there'd be knock-on implications in terms of location and indeed the type of housing that would be achieved. So I think you've got to look at all those issues in the round.
Thank you. Okay, fine. Well, as I say, let's try and move forward. Again, I'm really grateful for these contributions because they're really reasoned and they're thoughtful and they are productive and they are showing a united approach we will take to this. But I think we must reflect a fault line when it emerges, because that's a friendly thing to do. And I think there is a fault line that emerges if as I say, if one part of the council wants to see more building. I can't agree with that, and I think what we've got to try and do is to moderate the amount of building here to satisfy our existing communities and reassure them that you know, we're not just going to keep on building. Okay, I don't actually have anyone else now. Was there anyone else who wanted to speak? Yes, I've got Rosanna Currans, please.
Thank you, Jeremy. It's really, I did read all the report. It took quite a while, but I did get through it. I was really pleased to see how much care for health, schools, and everything else is in there. It's one of my gripes at the moment. It's hospitals. I know we don't have any say where hospitals go. We are going to have various clinics, obviously, but I cannot see, with all these people that we are going to have coming to Dartford and all the families, that Darren Valley is going to cope with a much larger community. Have we done anything to ask if there is any chance that another hospital could be built somewhere in the vicinity to take into account all the extra patients that are going to be there? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, I've got Councillor Nicklin as well. I've got you on the list, Annie. Again, officers will come in and either support or not support me when I say this. I think that the growth of a hospital is certainly one way to tackle the health needs of a community, but there are others too, and I think one of those is going to be more community health and more local health. I think what we've Rosanna, could you get back to mute? I'm so sorry, but do you mind?
I'm trying to. I can't use this.
That's all right. Don't worry. That's okay. That's perfect. That's okay. Don't worry. Don't panic. Don't panic. Don't panic, Mr. Mandarin. We've got the. Thank you. I think there are various ways of delivering, and actually, hospitals tend to just suck in demand again from areas. And I think if there were to be another major hospital or a major growth at Darrett Valley, what we would see is simply people from a much wider area being sucked into that hospital. I think what we've got to see is the trends in health, really. Clearly, it's much better if people don't go to hospital and don't have to go to hospital because they have healthcare in their local vicinity. And I think that's one of the strategies. One of the frustrations, and I absolutely agree with this, is that the CCG, and it's not a criticism of them, it's just simply, it seems to be the way the NHS works. The CCG is constantly in a situation of planning, but seems to miss various points of trigger for actually developing anything. And so there's always a plan in place for a new health centre or health facility, but it's very difficult to get them to commit to actually building it. And even though I'm a relatively young man in my mid-20s, 57, while I've been in this council for 20 odd years, I've seen a number of planning applications that have given permission for local health hubs as part of that permission, only for the CCG to say, well, we don't want to take it up because we don't want to have the ongoing commitment to it. We're going to stick with our plan. And West Hill is a case in point where, you know, there was a facility planned on the corner of Carewood Road Avenue, which was intended to be a new health facility, pretty much where the West Hill Hospital was, and the CCG said, well, we don't really require that. And in the town centre itself, you'll be aware, whilst the proposition may have been quite controversial to bring GPs together in the town centre, the CCG have said, well, actually, we don't feel there's a need for new GPs in the town at the moment, and I find it astonishing. So we have to work with them to really demonstrate that we have a commitment to the whole rounded community: health, education, police, fire, everything, environmental improvements. Absolutely, air quality, they all throw into the mix, and we've got to keep juggling all these balls in the air and to try and make sure we deliver for our people on all of them. I do agree with you, Rosanna, that the health requirements going forward are going to be one of the key areas. I think where there might be a disagreement is whether or not we have to have a new hospital to do that, or whether we can deliver first-class community health facilities that are within a mile, 2 miles of our communities to make sure that people get the care they need. But I'll leave it there. Mr. Applin, again, in terms of our report on this, in terms of the thing dedicated to health, is there anything that I have said or haven't said that you would agree or disagree with, or an extra point you want to make?
Only to reassure members, we've been in discussion with the hospital trust there. Obviously, it's been quite difficult for the NHS at present, but just to reassure members that we continue to engage with them in future.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. Well, I'll come to Councillor Nicklin. My final comment on health is just that I'm very convinced, I'm very concerned that we don't come out of this pandemic crisis with mealy words about the NHS. We need to convert the feelings we all have for it at the moment into a meaningful strategy to support them going forward. And they're going to come out of this crisis. I mean, they're working on adrenaline, and they're working on pure determination and courage and the sense of commitment at the moment, but there'll come a point where they will be exhausted. And what we need to do is to make sure, I think, as a council, that we are there to support them and to reassure them that the facilities and the funding and the support for them is going to carry forward into the decades ahead, not just the weeks and months of the pandemic. It's like everything else, you know, you can take lots of things for granted, but when you need them, you absolutely see the value. And I think I'm very committed to making sure that Dartford Dartford is one of those areas where we do that. I might as well take this opportunity, if you don't mind. I wasn't going to do this tonight, but it's just sprung me that we might as well do it tonight. And we'll put a PR release out tomorrow. But on your behalf, and I hope you agree, Dartford Borough Council has agreed to fund the training of 2 doctors. And to take them right through their new medical training. And it's just a way of us saying we're not a big authority and we don't have the capacity to do much of this. But I hope members would agree that it's a very worthwhile thing for us to have done, to have taken trainee doctors from the Dartford area, that's one of our specifications, and to see them through their medical training. And we'll be paying for their medical training through the ensuing years. We pick up 1 student this year, and we pick up 1 student next year and take them through staggered. And at the end, they will come out as fully qualified doctors. And again, I hope members just accept that's a, something practical that we can do to reflect the importance of healthcare at this time, but also going forward. I'm sorry, Danny, I held you up for ages. Councillor Nicklin.
Thank you, Leader. I appreciate that. I suppose the most, following on from what you said, I echo completely what you just said. I nod in my head in agreement that it would be completely alien for the councillor, as a councillor for Ebbsfleet, to not speak about housing and Ebbsfleet, given the huge part Ebbsfleet plays in this document and this plan. But following on from what you said about health priorities, a new health hub for Ebbsfleet for the benefit of all communities locally, Swanscombe and Green Isle in particular. There are plans for a new health hub in Ebbsfleet, the international station, which I know many members are aware. The frustrating thing is that it is quite a way away as the consultation and the planning goes into preparing for that. Obviously, I welcome that. I completely echo your sentiment that the best way to go, in my view, is good quality, localised, community-based healthcare provision that people can access quickly and that fits around their needs, rather than traditional centralised, quite expensive healthcare provision. That's not to say that hospitals don't have their place, but certainly good quality, localised, numerous good quality localised healthcare is the way to go. And I'm excited about the prospect for that health hub in Ebbsfleet. We had our own problems before councillors were elected for Ebbsfleet, with the CCG being quite slow to respond to the obvious data, and I was quite frustrated at the time, and I echoed those comments, as I know others did. I'm hoping that this plan will provide the CCG with some of the direction, the data, and the evidence that they need to see firsthand the direction of travel and the increase in population around Ebbsfleet and Dartford more generally. We do need more health services locally, and I know there's a lot of enthusiasm from the local population and local medical professionals living locally to be involved in that. Can I just move on talking about housing? I congratulate officers and members for the huge amount of work that's gone into this document. It's a very detailed, very exciting plan. Of course, I'm going to support. I just had a couple of questions for the officers, if they could just perhaps provide me with some answers. I work in social housing. I'm very passionate about social housing. It was one of the things when we moved here, I was proud to see that Dartford as a council was involved in providing social housing as a council and as involved in that market. So that's a great thing, and I commend that. I was just wondering what more we're doing on the social housing section and about affordable housing, whether we're looking at branching out into any other markets. And working in social housing, I know there are a number of products being tested at the moment, things like rent to own and the different variations of the leasehold and shared ownership market, the way that that's progressing and increasing share of the market in terms of tenure type for new build properties, whether there was anything else that we were looking about for product types and exploring that as an option to increase choice for people moving to Dartford. And then I was also linking onto that, interested to read some of the data around the demand, and I see that there seems to be an increased demand for 3-bedroom properties. And I was just wondering if officers could share any more insight into what our thought process is behind that, because from a social housing perspective, my employer, that's one of the things that we're really interested in, is around sort of managing that journey for families as they go through their life cycle. So single people in 1-bedroom properties, then having a family, moving on to 3- and 4-bedroom properties, and there being enough of those for them to stay local. And then likewise, people who, when children leave home, they then downsize back to 1- 2-bedroom properties, still within the localised area. So I was just keen to see if there was any information that officers could offer in terms of insight for that. I think that's enough for me at the moment, Leader. I do have a couple of other points about other parts of the document, but we may come on to that in due course. So for the moment, I'll give way. Thank you.
Thank you. We can come back to that then. Can I just check, Adrian, is that a legacy hand, or do you want to come back again? Not now. I'll take the answers to Danny's first, but is that a legacy hand?
No, that's a new hand.
That's fine. That's perfect. We'll come back to you in a second. Okay. Could I ask then, Mark, in terms of the first of all the tenure mix and also the demographics of how people are living today? It's obviously reflected in the document, but how proactive can we be, or are we simply a passenger watching it?
Yeah, it's a really important point, and I think the plan's pretty clear that we are looking for a real genuine mix of tenures overall in the borough to reflect those needs and the changing circumstances of residents. It is an area there's quite a lot of technical background on. By way of explanation, there's a report that's been on our website already. I could certainly send a link to Councillor Nicklin if that'd be helpful, that sets out all the details and the number crunching, but it really reflects that point around trying to get a genuine mix of tenures whilst ensuring that mix also includes sufficient provision of the right kind to meet the critical needs of the borough, as we were discussing earlier. But there's a lot of data out there. I'll be quite happy to supply if members are interested.
Thank you. And I think it's worth also, Danny, you having a look at the work that's done by David's committee, the Strategic Housing Board, because again, that's one of the big reflections in that board, is to try and stay abreast of all the changes in demography and household styles, and to try and make sure we've got a product on offer, or at least to triage people towards the products on offer to meet their needs. Everything from, frankly, somebody emerging from prison with housing requirements, through to someone who's been in homeless crisis, moving into their first homes, right through to large family homes that are required to support the economy and make sure that people don't have to live outside Dartford and work here. So I think we're looking at all of those kind of things. And I know also, from my point of view, I'm happy to say we're up for innovation. So I think that we were very interested in things like community self-build. Self-build is okay for some if you've got those talents and skills and that kind of grand designs approach to things, but it's not for everyone. But whereas community self-build, where fraternal groups of people get together to actually take land on and then build each other's houses together in a cooperative and collaborative way, are very popular in Germany. And I think there's those kind of innovations we could absolutely look at. I did have Adrian next, but I said at the beginning of the meeting that I would always prioritise group leaders. So sorry, Adrian, but your group leader's nipped in ahead of you with his hand up. So Councillor Gosign.
I completely forgot about that. Actually, I'm sorry. I do apologise for that.
No, you upset your members all you like. Doesn't bother me.
Sorry about it. Let me just jump in quickly and I'll come back out again, because I just want to echo Danny's points on Ebbsfleet and the CCG. There's massive problems with getting GP appointments for residents in Ebbsfleet. Also, it also has a knock-on effect to the other surrounding areas of Swanscombe and Greenhive. I just wanted to move on to Swanscombe, actually, in saying that on policy E3, point number 1, where it says about Swanscombe will retain and improve its identity and positive characteristics, including a popular residential core and stock of dwellings of small and larger families. It carries on to talk about the local area and such. I just want to hope that is something that is that does happen. I know that residents in Swanscombe as well, because of Councillor Emma Ben Moose is not here, she's asked me to pass on. They're very passionate about having their space. They're very passionate about keeping the identity of Swanscombe, and I'll champion that point as well. And I hope that the DCB board and the officers who have done an excellent job in this putting this report together, and I thank them for that. And with that, I will also be supporting this report as well.
Cool, that's fine, thank you. Well, as I say, I think we're all very committed to those communities. They are this patchwork of really vibrant, different communities are what makes our borough so interesting and so viable. I'm absolutely convinced of it, and it's not just about cherry picking areas of relative wealth and viability, and we've got some of those. It's also about picking those communities where they are simply successful for a whole range of other reasons, which is that they are great community spirit, great community feeling, appealing. They have lots of employment, small business employment going on. It's about that colourful mosaic of patchwork of great communities we have, and believe me, nothing we want to do is going to be to merge them. I regard that just as important as I'm very proud of Dartford, and you appreciate I wear my badge for Dartford all over the place, but once you're within Dartford, it's possible to be equally proud of all the individual communities within it and to try and defend them and to recognise their inherent values and qualities. That said, that I can't possibly defer. I've run out of reasons to prevent Adrian Oakley-Dow from speaking again, so off you go, Adrian.
Thank you, Jeremy. You've rather given me some more ammunition, I'm afraid.
Oh dear.
Your last comment, so for which I apologise. As the team of Eagles flying information that the Labour group is, I was actually going to speak on behalf of the absent Councillor Ben Musa tonight as well, in that how do we scrutinise the inherent policy within this local plan that I would suggest doesn't present a mosaic. It actually presents a two-colour, the bottom half of which is green belt, admittedly, and the top half seems to be development, for which I apologise as saying something quite so gauche and crude as that, for which you've already taken offence, Jeremy. But why are we, I'm going to ask the question, why do we restrict housing growth to the areas that are already overcrowded and whose infrastructure are already under stress, which again is an admission which is regularly made, certainly vis-a-vis potential development of Swanscombe Peninsula as a given reason for not being able to support the London resort development. I don't see any policy whereby the green and pleasant leafy lanes are being as encouraged to welcome development.
Okay, all right. Well, it's a fair point, but I think there is a belief. The green and leafy lanes, someone's got to live there, and it doesn't mean that they don't have inherent values for everyone else. I'm again, it does appear to be a deliberate fault line tonight, and I say that not as a way of provoking anything, but simply as a reflection of what the conversation's saying. I actually think that the green belt and the areas around it are as important to the people who live in urban areas as they are to the people who are very fortunate enough to live in a green belt area. That's not the reason for having a green belt is not simply to provide an enclave of privilege for people. It is actually to prevent the sprawl of other communities that would otherwise lose their identity. So I think if we were to probably do a piece of research that asked people of Dartford whether or not they would rather see the green belt be developed upon simply because it would prevent urban areas growing any further, I don't think that would be reflected very well in response. I mean, we can actually test it if you want to, and I guess that's what elections are going to be about, really. You know, if it's the proposition that, yeah, well, you know, we shouldn't just be building up in urban areas, we should be looking at the green belt. But can I just say, it's not about that we don't have a list of things that are just urban or a list of places that are just urban. The reason why areas get developed is because they are on transport corridors. It's because it's where the facilities are. It is because, you know, it would be kind of perverse, wouldn't it, to have a major transport node like Ebbsfleet International Station and then not say, well, we need to exploit that as a place where development can take place, just as in the town centre. I think people would expect development in the town centre. So in many ways, I'm grateful for the honesty of the debate tonight, but I think it's leading us into a kind of a worrying drive for development, which isn't really likely to be supported by people. But I think we should be open about having that conversation, and if it means more research and more consultation on that, we can do that. But I can tell you the position of this council at the minute is to constrain development inside urban areas where transport nodes are, for the simple reason it suppresses trips, it suppresses movement, it suppresses car journeys. That's what it does. does. And if you start to develop in other areas, all you do is you put people on the road more, you create more traffic concerns and havoc for everyone, and you disimprove air quality in wider ways. And as I said to Councillor Gaskin, you also create a kind of, once you develop that, what do you do next? Because the demand keeps coming, it won't stop, and therefore you keep on until eventually you've covered your entire borough in housing and concrete. And I think that's just not where we want to be. We want to protect those areas, and it's a huge, and there are gradations of protection as well. It isn't. I don't want anyone to feel this is just about green and pleasant areas getting protection and nowhere else does. There are massive protections in place in every single zone and ward of our borough, which prevents the overdevelopment of places relatively close to the town centre, like Newtown, your own ward, where there are absolutely density objectives. There are zones there, not a major development area. The Development Control Board has the ability to prevent overdevelopment in places like Newtown and West Hill and East Hill. So I kind of get the point, but I don't think it is driven quite by this binary polarity between, well, there are some very fortunate areas, then the rest of us have to put up with loads of development. That really isn't the way it's going, and I think we have a balance. However, I take the point. What might be interesting, Adrian, is if we were to have this debate and move it in perhaps to the Strategic Housing Board at some point, and perhaps you come along and have that debate, and we see the figures. Swanscombe, for example, I do understand Ebbsfleet, of course, exaggerates the figures of growth in that area. It looks as if it's growing very fast. I don't actually think that Swanscombe is, if I'm honest with you. I think Swanscombe has retained a lot of its, in fact, all of its community feel and central community strategies around them to protect it as a community. I don't think Swanscombe is growing any faster or greater than anywhere else, but we can perhaps get those figures for you and be open about that. So yes,
opportunity. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I've got Anne Allen. Thank you. And then I've got Andy Lloyd.
Well, thank you, Chairman. And I was just interested in, as a member of the Strategic Housing Board, I've been very interested in the comments there. And again, I just wanted to sort of rewind a little bit there. Jeremy, you were talking about community housing and community build. And I think that's something that possibly we might need to put on our agenda with the Chairman's permission. But for many years, I had the privilege of representing an area that actually was a self-build, and that was Jordans Wood Estate. I can remember many, many years ago when people actually got together, and there might have been a carpenter and a plumber and a bricklayer, and they purchased the land and they drew lots and they built one another's houses. And if you look at that now, that is a fantastic community up there, a great asset to the borough. And it's exactly what you're saying about building communities. So I think we've been doing it for a long, long time. It might be over 40 years ago, but it's an excellent community up there. And it's a very good example. I think that might be one that we may need to revisit. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Andy.
There we go. Sorry, I had to unmute myself. Well, may I just join everybody else first in congratulating the team led by Mark on the development of a fantastic report. I mean, obviously I've been a part of the working party, and it carries my support. Just a couple of points I wanted to make. First, let's just deal with this risk register point, which Adrian Oakley-Dower raised. It's true. So what a risk register does is identifies the things that could go wrong, and then what you might do about it, and if you do those things, where you might get to. And when it comes to affordable housing, it's definitely a risk that our target may not be met. There are things we're going to do about it, such as this plan. But of course, not everything is in our own hands. There's some central policy which really needs to be changed to help us. And so therefore, the consequence of having taken the actions that we can do, I mean, we're still not 100% confident that we can deliver on the affordable housing. So that's the purpose of a risk register, to identify what might go wrong so you can take actions before it does go wrong. But let's just, the discussion I heard, there was lots of talk around, are we really building enough? And it might create to some listeners the impression that we don't build in Dartford, but of course what we have been doing, and I can tell you as the finance guy and looking at the numbers of the stock every year, it's been going up by roughly 1,000 every year, our housing stock. It really has been growing at a phenomenal rate, and our infrastructure is keeping pace just, but only just with that growth. And it's not going to stop. We have got targets and housing allocations put to us by the central government. And without a plan like this, what you risk is that the developments will be made in a place that you don't want them to be, of a nature that you don't want them to be. And so we need this plan to give us identified the sufficient areas that can be developed to a sufficient standard. And so that is why we're doing it, because the risk otherwise is that you end up with houses where we really just don't want them, of the nature that we really don't want, because they won't be suitable for this area. So I do support it. I think there's some great debates, but I don't want anyone to walk away with the impression here that we're not delivering relative to everybody else in the country. We're actually delivering very well here, and most of our residents will tell us so on housing. Thank you.
Thank you. Just on that point, I'm sorry to put you on the spot, Sonia, but would you be able just to give me a quick pen sketch of the conditions that are now imposed on Gravesham? Because I think it's important, because what's happened in the last few weeks is that Gravesham has effectively been instructed to, I mean, in layman's terms, pass more housing applications. But is that a fair summary of what's happened? I mean, sorry, I don't want to drag you into an argument about the rights and wrongs of it, but just the simple facts of it. Are there planning officers and members now under a different regime than they were a month ago?
Yes, basically, when we have a planning application, we are required to consider it in line with the development plan, unless, and this is what national policy says, unless there is not an update development plan, or if there's not an adequate housing supply. And because they haven't got an adequate housing supply, they are now at risk is that all development is sustainable, and therefore the presumption is that development should go ahead almost, basically. They find it very hard to resist development unless there's good reasons to refuse it other than the principle.
So that's really, sorry, the reason I did that rather clumsily was to absolutely reinforce what Andy Lloyd just said, which is that it's better to be in control of your development and growth. At least you can have these debates, and you can perhaps even have fallings out and arguments about it. But at the moment, those arguments and debates are moot in Gravesham, because the instruction there is to approve any development that's sustainable. So, you know, we don't want to be in that position. We want to make sure we keep our destiny in our own hands. I've got David Moat.
Thank you, Chair. As chairman of the Strategic Housing Board, I just thought I'd better jump in. Really pleased with Danny's comments. And one thing people don't realise is there is actually a lot of information about the different housing products and opportunities actually on the council's website. Our big issue is that we don't tell anyone that it's there. And one of the things we are working on actually within the Strategic Housing Board is creation of this mosaic, which the leader has already mentioned, which will hopefully help people identify the situation they're in and find where they need to go to next in order to progress their housing needs. It's also a very important part of the Strategic Housing Board to create a strategic housing plan. But we've held back on that because it really needs to be built on the foundations of the local plan, which obviously we're talking about now, but also the fact that census is coming up this year. So we will have a lot more information we can build from. But the next stage will be to create a strategic housing plan, which will take all these things into consideration. And I would certainly welcome Adrian to join us on some occasion to discuss that. The issue of the great north-south divide, which seems to be very unusual that we have this in Dartford, is simple. The fact that we are slightly lucky in the fact that we have an awful lot of brown land north of the A2, and we have what I refer to as the nice green soft underbelly of Dartford. And therefore, in the old days of sequential testing, we would have to build out our brown land first anyway. And it is quite correct in saying that that is where the stations are, that is where the infrastructure is. So it would seem logical to do that. Otherwise, we could build a very large development on the very southern borders of Dartford, and everyone then have to drive in their car to drive across the rest of the green belt in order to get to where all the jobs are in the north of the town. But that's not going to be the situation forever. And as my great friend and colleague, Councillor Honeysett, knows, I do not believe the Greenbelt to be a sacred cow. But at the moment, we are exceptionally lucky in the fact we do have the area that we can actually build on. And I think we're doing so in a very uniform way. But we desperately need to have this particular local plan in place so that we can actually have our destiny in our own hands.
Sure. Okay, thank you for that. And I'll say it again, as I said it before in this meeting, I'm genuinely very grateful for the debate we're having. It hasn't become rancorous and it hasn't become politicised. It's just become a straightforward debate, and it's an honourable debate to have. I just think we are developing different stances, and it's reasonable for us to have that and to share an appreciation of each other's views. But as I say, I think we are absolutely committed to not developing more and more, and I don't agree that the Greenbelt or Greenfield sites are, somehow should be developed upon simply to relieve pressure around urban areas, because I think urban areas, as I say, is where the investment in traffic and other things have been. Adrian did talk very briefly about Swanscombe Peninsula, and clearly there's been some developments in the last few days. I'm sure members are aware of it, that the PINS have now accepted the application for the theme park at Swanscombe. It's not obviously approving the application. Very, very long way to go. But Mark, do you just want to quickly say a word about that and whether anything in our plan is now changed as a result of that? I suspect it hasn't, because it's an early stage, but our plan is still sound given the news of the last couple of days, is it?
You're on mute.
He's telling us to wait for him, but I don't think we will. We'll just move on without him. He's obviously having difficulty unmuting, is he?
Shall I answer instead, Chair?
Yeah, go on, Sonia. Yeah, you can ride into the rescue. He's clearly beaten down to submission.
Yes, I mean, it doesn't make the local plan unsound. The London Resort application, it's been accepted. That simply means it's been validated by the planning inspectorate. As you say, it's got a long way to go in terms of examination. And as Mark has put forward in the report, should it get approval by the Secretary of State, then we'd look to review the local plan at that time to take that into account.
Fine, thank you. All right. Is there any particular view on the London Resort from members? It's likely, as it moves forward, it's likely to become a huge issue for us. David, anyone else? I'll take David Moat, then anyone else?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry. It's going to be in my ward, but it's going to be in the same as Councillor Harman and Butterfield. It's in part of our ward, which sits north of Swanscombe. I'll just jump back to Swanscombe. One of the things about Swanscombe is that it is a remarkable place. I've been knocking around there for 30 years, and there are new homes being built in Swanscombe. They're all council houses, which obviously local Swanscombe people will have first dibs at. So there is growth in there, but it's in its best possible way, it's very parochial, which is not a bad thing. I think there is a lot of concern about the London. It is going to impact on Dartford as a whole, in particular Eastern Dartford. There have been a lot of promises in the consultation that went before the submission of the application, and I think it's going to be down to us to be very rigorous when it comes to making sure that the promises on infrastructure, i.e. the routes into London Resort, and in fact their promises on retaining things like the Dartford Marshes and the environment associated with that is part of it. From what I can see, a lot of the build will take place on the old cement factory land, which is already covered in cement anyway. But we have to make sure that the other areas which they don't intend to build on and they intend to manage better as an environmental zone is managed as an environmental zone and has access for everybody. And that is a particular importance, I think. So neither against or for, but must make sure that if they do get this through, they maintain the promises that they have made as part of their consultation. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councillor McLean and then Councillor Eadie.
Yeah, thank you. Only to say I will be for, provided the infrastructure is delivered. I think we spoke about that a lot. David's touched on it. We spoke about it a lot at the initial consultation. The big problem I foresee really is people using resort and the parking chaos that's going to cause. for those residents. The other thing I foresee also is the impact on our own resources at the council, particularly environmental health, licensing, those type of things, and whatever we build, and I'm sure it can be done, built into some sort of framework, that there is a level of ongoing 106 compensation to help manage that. Significant, you know, as someone who works in that, I understand when these big developments go up, the impact on regulatory services is significant. The ongoing strain for planning officers with every single change that gets made, that we somehow, and I know Sonia and her team are very good at this and they build that in. So yes, in support, caveated with the infrastructure and resources.
Sure. Thank you. But my question wasn't so much about talking about whether we support it or not is another matter. I was really just talking about bringing it back to our local plan and whether there are relevancies to our local plan that people want to raise. But that's fine. The conversation can carry on this vein, but let's bring it back to the local plan. Councillor Reedy.
Hi, sorry. Yeah, I just wanted to say, obviously, this is a very in-depth plan, and due to ill health, I really don't feel like I've given it the time it's needed. But I just wanted to sort of comment on the part that I do know, which is Swanscombe Peninsula, and my particular concern would be, it says on page 244, agenda item 7, about the so where are we up to? So natural biodiversity gains, basically to rehabitat where land is built on. And I worry about, in terms of like the cotton marshes, really sort of marshland areas being built on, which are a barrier, a natural barrier to flooding. And that's my main concern, is that are we going to take a staunch stand against developing on so-called brownfield sites, which actually do contribute a lot to the air quality in terms of absorbing carbon and things like that. That's what I wanted to ask about, please.
Okay, well, we get an answer. I think you meant Greenfield site, not Brownfield, but Mark.
Oh, Swanscombe, sorry, is Brownfield, is it?
Yeah, so to confirm the approach in relation to the peninsula, notwithstanding the resort, would be to recognise and have on our policies map that green space that's designated for its open space value. And there are a number of other policies as well that pick up on the biodiversity aspects. And obviously marshland in particular is a really key aspect of the habitats of Dartford Borough. And yeah, we reflect that. So it's a very, very interesting area there. And we look to recognise all its characteristics across the whole of the peninsula, and we've tried to refine our policy to reflect those key areas.
Thank you. And one quick question for me on that: is flood risk affected by the proposed development? I mean, or is that part? Is it mitigated, or is it not changed?
In terms of the resort?
Yeah.
That might remain to be seen, but I don't know if Sonia wants to comment.
Okay. Is it out of the remit of our local plan, I guess? But Sonia, have you got any instinctive view on this?
On the result, yeah. Flood risk is an issue, and they're obviously discussing that with the Environment Agency in detail. But one of the methods that they're using is to sort of use actually some of the contaminated land where it's deposits, where it's chalk kiln dust that's been deposited on the site, and it's actually raised land. So then they're going to use that to raise the land, and that deals with the flood risk basically.
Okay. In the words of the Vauxhall advert, someone's tired. So I heard a yawn then. Did everybody hear a yawn? Sorry about that. I don't know who that was. Don't admit to it now. Okay, I think we are moving towards a conclusion now. I'm not seeing Laura. That's a history hand. Is it still up there? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Sorry.
That's all right. I'm not seeing any new hands. So shall we move? Oh yes. Oh, he's back. He's back. Go on then, Adrian Oakley-Dow.
It was just to say in reply to your question on flood mitigation. It was just to use the time old phrase.
well, we'll see, won't we? And I think everyone's looking at that now, and I think only time will tell as to whether it's a good idea to build on a marsh again.
Sure. Well, the only thing I would say about that, of course, is that you deal with these things in terms of 100-year and 1,000-year events, and quite frankly, if you come across a 100-year and a 1,000-year event, I don't want to say it doesn't matter, but the fact is that some events simply you can't do anything about, and they just are what they are. So I think there's a huge amount of work going on behind the scenes. I forget what it's called. Is it Operation 2100 or something that's going on behind the scenes to actually look at the flood protections? Our big concern there, of course, is that they don't just look at protecting London and see us as some sacrificial community. But to be fair, that isn't the approach they're taking, and I think they are looking at a whole range of mitigations. I think a few of us visited the Amazon site, the new warehouse at Amazon, and we saw there one of the benefits of that development was actually the rising of the sea wall there as part of that development. Now, of course, that has to be comprehensive. One thing I know about water is it doesn't worry about planning applications, but we provide, it's a step in the right direction that everybody who develops on the waterfront is making their own protections, and I think that's what we must hope happens. But there are benefits to this, and I think the report makes clear actually there are some natural environment benefits from some of these plans, because land that's just been despoiled with having loads of concrete dust poured on them, it's not exactly David Attenborough territory, but there is a chance with a bit of work and enhancement it can be much more valuable to the ecology. But anyway, there we are.
I'd agree, but the three important words are black duck marsh.
Yes, I don't think Black Duck Marsh is actually under particular threat, but I understand it's an area of interest for all of us. But my understanding is that the further down towards the peninsula you get, the less it will be developed, and there are no plans to. But I think it's we'd all love to think it was being done for wonderful environmental reasons, but I think it's more prosaic than that. I think that the Port of London Authority are maintaining their navigation lines across it, so nothing can be built there because the Port of London Authority want to maintain navigation there. So there we are. But we as you say, we've got a way to go yet.
Yeah.
But I think the principle is we understand where we stood, and there's been support for the London Resort for some time on a cross-party basis, and I think we just need to work this through and remain vigilant. The one area I'm very concerned about is local businesses. They have been treated pretty badly, if I'm honest with you, and part of that is what the blight that happens when a big development happens nearby. But I think we've got an obligation to really wade in and try and help those local businesses and say, look, to developers, look, you've really got to look after these people, and you've got to do it in a fair way, and you've got to make sure things are put right. You've got to be a good neighbour, and so there we go. Okay, I think we've probably exhausted conversation. So shall we move then on to the actual recommendations? And I don't get a sense that from what I've heard from around the table that anybody has any particular reason to vote against any part of this. So are members happy if I take all the recommendations as one, or does anybody want to propose that we look at the recommendations separately or draw out any particular recommendation? There are a total of 10 of them. My plan would be to take them all and just accept them all, but let me give you an opportunity out there if somebody wants to raise one of the recommendations for discussion or separate consideration or vote. I'm not seeing that.
Yeah, but could we take advice from Marie Kelly-Stone on that?
It's nothing to do with Marie Kelly-Stone. I mean, we can take advice from Marie Kelly-Stone, but it's not. I'm not asking you for a legal matter. It's a matter of whether any member wants to vote against any of these recommendations. But yeah, I will do, Marie. I mean, you understand what I'm trying to do, Marie?
Chairman, yeah, it's not a legal issue. It's purely a matter of just going ahead and either doing each recommendation or doing it en bloc.
Yeah, we can either have 10 separate votes, or we can have one vote. And I'm not seeing anybody in the room saying that they want to draw out any of the recommendations to vote on separately. So I think it's fairly safe for us to take the whole package. So we have 10 recommendations. You see them there: 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, 2.4, 2.5, 2.6, 2.7, 2.8, 2.9, and 2.10. Are members happy to support that?
Great, Chairman.
Thank you. Is there anybody in the room who doesn't support any of those? No, thank you very much indeed. Well, my final words must be to the officers. Members have done a great job too, and you know that. I'm always in awe of the work that members do behind the scenes and the interest they show in this. And to read this is a fairly significant document, and I commend you all for doing so. You clearly didn't spot the paragraph that says that I remain leader forever. There's a little paragraph in there buried away in the middle of it. You didn't see that, so we've approved that now. I'm only joking. But thank you for reading all that. But to our officers, and I must also include Teresa Rakowska, although she's departed now and to the Elysian fields of retirement, where she's going to be joined by Sherry soon. The fact is that Teresa put a huge amount of work into this, and Sonia has now taken on that mantle. And I am enormously proud of our planning officers. They've also been keeping, of course, the daily job going and the day work going on at the same time. And whilst many of us looked on with the Ebbsfleet decision, the Swanscombe Peninsula decision in the last couple of days, thinking, oh, that's interesting. Our poor planning officers had to look on it and say, well, that's interesting. That's my life gone for the next 6 months. So a huge amount of work to come for them as well. So, but thank you. When you look at this document, I don't think there's a word wrong in it, and I think it's an absolute commendation of the work, your professional expertise, your dedication, and your straightforward competence, if I'm honest. So thank you very much indeed. We're very, very lucky to have you, and I hope that by approving this in relatively short order, we've done you credit, and it's an endorsement of the fact that you've put together a first-class local plan submission. Sonia, could you just tell us what happens now?
Mark might actually be the better person, as he's lived and breathed it for the last few weeks.
Fine. Okay, Mark, she's dumping it on you. It's all down to you now.
Yes, so we would put the document on the website along with some supporting evidence and other documents, and there will be a period of 6 weeks in which people can make comments on its soundness, and that's all rounded up, and then that can go to the planning inspector, and if they agree it, in due course it will come back to full council for adoption and to come into full force.
Fine. Okay. Well, there we are. We've done our business tonight. A massive agenda. Thank you so much indeed. I won't do a normal sum up of our situation with regard to COVID. I think you all know where we are. We appear to be in a good place with regard to vaccinations, and I think our town is responding well in terms of its testing sites and its vaccination sites. The messages I'm getting from everybody is that they are being treated incredibly well, whether they're going for asymptomatic testing, symptomatic testing, or indeed vaccination. They are receiving what I'm determining to be a first-class service. If any of you find experiences that you feel you can add to that, and if negative or otherwise, in fact, more likely negative, it's more helpful really to get negative responses from you if something's going wrong, so we can put them right. But what I'm hearing at the moment is our community are being very, very well served by the professionals in the health service and the armed services and others who are delivering these amazing life-changing bits of work. But as I say, do feel free to share that, and as your role of local members, if you find there's anything the council could be doing to improve the lot of your members locally, then do let us know. Otherwise, I'll wish you good night and thank you very much indeed. And Mr. Twyman, I've not neglected any of my duties tonight. We've covered everything on the papers, yeah? He's gone. Well, I'll assume that's the case. Let me just quickly ask Sherry and Sarah then. Sherry and Sarah, you're happy that we've covered the issues that you want us to cover?
Yes, I am, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Sarah?
Yes, I'm happy.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, then. Have a great evening and stay safe, everybody. Thank you.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Good night.
Bye-bye. Take care.
Good night.